Arundhati joins a really long and proud list of people who care deeply and who listen deeply, and then who speak fearlessly. This is our salvation, this kind of writer, this kind of person. And I'm so delighted that you are here with all of your enthusiasm and your energy to welcome this very brave sister. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. And it's been many years since I've been to the United States. And these last years, I've spent almost all my time writing and traveling in India, but actually looking at what we've done to democracy. When I talk about democracy being hollowed out, I remember as a child, as a student in school, I once stole all the carrots from my Malayalam teacher's garden and planted the tops back. And for a long time, he kept watering them and wondering why it wasn't working out. And sometimes I think this is what's happened. You know, each of these institutions that's supposed to make up a democracy, the press, the courts, the parliament, all of them have been hollowed out. And we keep watering them, and we keep voting, and we keep hoping, but it keeps wilting further and further. I don't know how familiar you are with the Kashmir problem, but I'll just give you a small potted history. Kashmir was an independent kingdom at the in 1947 when India and Pakistan were partitioned at the time of independence. And both India and Pakistan tried to lay claim to Kashmir. At the time, the king was a Hindu king with a Muslim majority citizenry. And he fled basically from Srinagar to Jammu and then signed an accession deed which made Kashmir a part of India. But then the Pakistani army and some non-army people came in, and basically Kashmir is now divided between India and Pakistan. And since 1947, the people have struggled in Indian-occupied Kashmir for independence, and that struggle became an armed struggle in 1989. And to give you some idea of what's happening there, at the height of the conflict in Iraq, the US had 180,000 troops in Iraq. India has between 500 and 700,000 troops in the Kashmir Valley. I mean, the media in India just blanks out what's really going on there, not with silence, but with a lot of noise, telling a lot of lies. So here, when this piece came out, there were whole programs on TV called "Has Arundhati Roy Crossed the Line?" So anyway, for the past 60 days or so, since about the end of June, the people of Kashmir have been free. Free in the most profound sense. They have shrugged off the terror of living their lives in the gun sights of 500,000 heavily armed soldiers in the most densely militarized zone in the world. After 18 years of administering a military occupation, the Indian government's worst nightmare has come true. Having declared that the militant movement has been crushed, it is now faced with a nonviolent mass protest, but not the kind it knows how to manage. This one is nourished by people's memory of years of repression in which tens of thousands have been killed, thousands have been disappeared, hundreds of thousands tortured, injured, and humiliated. That kind of rage, once it finds utterance, cannot easily be tamed, rebottled, and sent back to where it came from. In fact, in the last few years, the report that you'll find outside talks about mass graves that have been uncovered in Kashmir, where 2,900 bodies have been found in 2,700 graves. So now, there are double-decker graves and triple-decker graves and so on. For all these years, the Indian state, known amongst the knowing as the deep state, has done everything it can to subvert, suppress, represent, misrepresent, discredit, interpret, intimidate, purchase, and simply snuff out the voice of the Kashmiri people. It has used money, lots of it, violence, lots of it, disinformation, propaganda, torture, elaborate networks of collaborators and informers, terror, imprisonment, blackmail, and rigged elections to subdue what Democrats would call the will of the people. Not surprisingly, the voice that the government of India has tried so hard to silence in Kashmir has massed into a deafening roar. Hundreds of thousands of unarmed people have come out to reclaim their cities, their streets, and their mohallas, their neighborhoods. They simply overwhelmed the heavily armed security forces by their sheer numbers and with a remarkable display of raw courage. Raised in a playground of army camps, checkpoints, and bunkers, with screams from torture chambers for a soundtrack, the younger generation has suddenly discovered the power of mass protest, and above all, the dignity of being able to straighten their shoulders and speak for themselves, represent themselves. For them, it's nothing short of an epiphany. They're in full flow. Not even the fear of death seems to hold them back. And once that fear has gone, of what use is the largest or second largest army in the world? What threat does it hold? Who should know that better than the people of India who won their independence in the way that they did? On the morning of the 18th, people began pouring into Srinagar from villages and towns across the valley, in trucks, jeeps, buses, and on foot. The police were faced with the choice of either stepping aside or executing a massacre. They stepped aside. Not a single bullet was fired.
Well, it's their favorite country, and of course, India is a great counterpoint to nasty China and dangerous Pakistan, and it's this emerging global, economic power, world's largest democracy. India has been very successful in selling this brand, particularly in the United States, but in other parts of the world as well. How has it been able to do that?
Well, I think because it's being marketed as this great finance destination, So it's not just India that's being successful in marketing itself, but for example, a number of foreign correspondents in Delhi have told me that they have explicit orders from their desk, from their editorial, no bad news from India. Because if it's a democracy, it's lovely to be investing there, right? But if you go around talking about the fact that they are massacring Muslims and they've announced a war on their own indigenous people, then it doesn't become such an attractive destination. See, the thing is that, while we talk about Kashmir and the army being turned into a police force, the opposite is happening in the rest of India. The police is being turned into a kind of army, because to push through these economic reforms, to build these huge infrastructural projects, the most important thing is to push people off their land. So you have our own Dick Cheney is the Home Minister called P. Chidambaram, who he's from Harvard, and he's a corporate lawyer who worked with, he was a non-executive director of the board of directors of this big mining corporation called Vedanta. Mm-hmm. And he was the lawyer for Enron. And then he became the finance minister. And he said that his vision for India was that 85% of India should live in cities, which means 500 million people should be moved off their lands. To do that, you need to become a police state, That's what's happening now. I mean, just big dams have displaced 30 million people. India has the largest sort of population of internally displaced people, these refugees to progress, you know. As I said, in 2005, these MOUs, these memorandums of understanding were signed with the major mining corporations of the world. But they have not been actualized because the resistance has not allowed it to happen, which is a huge thing, you know. And I don't know anywhere else where this, you know, at this level, a resistance has managed to do that. They are now being, I mean, 70,000 paramilitary troops are moving into the forests, and you know, the war is on. This is a population that's on the brink of survival, and now with this military intervention of not allowing them to go to the market, not allowing them to go home to their villages, the government of Chhattisgarh actually declared that it actually started a people's militia that went burning villages, you know, as it went. Something like 644 villages were emptied, and people were being forced to move into these roadside camps, you know, strategic hamleting like the US did in Vietnam. And the chief minister said that those who don't come to live in these camps are with the Maoists, which meant that just looking after your chickens or staying at home was dangerous terrorist activity, and you could be killed for that. You know, so what has happened is that this population is being prepared for a kind of gentle genocide. And in order to prepare a population for that, you have to sort of sever the link between normal human society and them. So they are either Maoists or they are people who live in museum cultures, as P. Chidambaram said, but they are basically faceless, nameless, dehumanized. So when they slip away, you won't notice.